Bombshell. You won't believe this. The Chicago Cubs have just made a decision that has completely caught the fan base off guard. And the most absurd part is that the player involved didn't even get a chance to wear the team's uniform in an official game. I'm going to tell you everything, but first, leave a like because this is where you can follow everything happening with the boys in blue. Braxton Garrett, who was recently acquired by the Cubs after 6 seasons of MLB experience, has been sent down to AAA Iowa before even making his debut. Yes, you read that right. The new addition arrived to strengthen the roster, only to be sent to the minors without throwing a single pitch for Chicago. And now one question is dominating the fan base. Why bring in a player for the playoff race and then just a few days later, send him to the minors before even finding out what he can bring to the team? The move happened this Saturday and immediately sparked a huge reaction among Cubs fans. The most direct explanation is the need to make room on the roster for the return of Clay Holmes, but the way the Cubs handled the situation has left many fans furious. Garrett arrived with the expectation of becoming another option for the pitching staff, especially at a point in the season when every front office decision could have enormous consequences. Now, instead of seeing him on the mound at Wrigley Field, fans will have to wait while the new addition works at AAA Iowa. And that's exactly where the biggest debate begins. For many fans, the problem isn't simply that Garrett was sent to Iowa. What is causing the outrage is the feeling that the Cubs chose to sacrifice a newly acquired player while keeping struggling pieces on the major league roster. And one of the names that immediately became part of the discussion was Caleb Thielbar. The question from fans is simple and uncomfortable. If there is a roster spot available and the goal is to build the best possible team for a potential playoff run, why is the new addition the one who has to leave before even getting an opportunity? This decision has opened a wound that was already beginning to frustrate the fan base. The Cubs are at a point in the season where there is no room for decisions that appear contradictory. With every series, the pressure increases. Every loss matters more. Every pitcher used in a critical situation can completely change the course of a game. And when a newly acquired player is sent to the minors without even making his debut, it naturally creates the impression that something simply doesn't add up. Garrett did not arrive in Chicago as a complete unknown. He has significant MLB experience and was acquired precisely because the organization saw a potential opportunity for him to help the roster. That's why the decision to immediately send him to AAA raises even more questions. If the organization believed he could contribute, why not first see how he responds to the Cubs environment? Why not give him an opportunity before making such a drastic decision? At the same time, there is an important factor that has to be considered. Clay Holmes is returning, and the Cubs needed to make room for him on the roster. From a roster management standpoint, a move had to be made. But the way that decision was handled is exactly what turned an ordinary roster move into a major controversy. And here's the detail that frustrates fans the most. This wasn't simply a matter of moving one player to make room for another. Garrett was sent to the minors before he even had a chance to show the Chicago fans what he could do. Imagine the situation. You follow the market, you see the Cubs adding a pitcher with MLB experience, you start imagining how he could help the team down the stretch, and just a few days later, you find out he has been sent to Iowa without even making his debut. For fans following every single move with October in mind, that is inevitably frustrating. Fans want to understand the criteria being used by the coaching staff and front office. They want to know whether recent performance is actually being taken into consideration. They want to know if there is a specific plan for Garrett, or if the pitcher simply became the easiest piece to remove in order to accommodate Holmes' return. And that matters even more because the Cubs are not in a position where they can simply focus on the distant future. The season is moving forward, and the pressure to secure a playoff spot is increasing every week. When a team is in this position, every player acquired at the deadline needs to be evaluated carefully. It's not enough to make an acquisition. The organization has to find ways to turn those additions into production on the field. That's why the decision involving Garrett could end up being much more important than it appears right now. If Garrett eventually plays an important role down the stretch, fans may look back at this decision as nothing more than a temporary step. He could spend some time in Iowa, work on certain aspects of his game, and then return to the major league roster ready to contribute. In that scenario, the controversy would likely fade. But there is another scenario, and that is exactly what worries fans. If Garrett remains away from the major league roster while other pitchers continue to struggle, questions about the logic behind this move will only become louder, especially if the Cubs need additional pitching depth during a critical stretch of games. That shows just how much is at stake with this roster right now. The Chicago Cubs know they cannot afford to waste opportunities. The season is not waiting. The competition isn't waiting either. And as the playoff race enters its most critical stage, decisions that appear small can quickly become major storylines. Craig Counsell now has an even greater responsibility to show that this decision is part of a larger plan. Because if Garrett was sent to Iowa simply to temporarily make room for Holmes, the organization will need to make it clear that there is still a path for the newly acquired pitcher to return and compete for his spot. Otherwise, the question will continue echoing around Wrigley Field: How can a player acquired to help the team down the stretch be sent to the minors before even making his first appearance in a Cubs uniform? And perhaps that is the most frustrating part for the fan base. Fans aren't necessarily demanding that Garrett immediately become a star. More than anything, they want to see him get an opportunity. They want to find out on the field whether the front office's investment can actually work. They want to see the new addition compete, take the mound, face opposing hitters, and prove what he can do. Cubs fans, now I want to hear from you. Do you agree with the decision to send Braxton Garrett to AAA Iowa to make room for the return of Clay Holmes? Or, in your opinion, should Caleb Thielbar have been the player to leave the Major League roster? Yes or no? Don't leave without sharing your opinion. Your participation helps make every discussion even more interesting. And make sure to subscribe so you can stay up to date with all the latest Chicago Cubs news. And if the situation involving Braxton Garrett had already raised questions about the Chicago Cubs' decisions, what came next has left the fan base even more concerned. Because while the front office is trying to find the best solutions to strengthen the roster down the stretch, another problem is developing behind the scenes. And this time, it involves a player many fans have been desperately waiting to see back at Wrigley Field. We're talking about Matt Shaw. Counsel confirmed that Shaw is still weeks away from returning to the Major League roster. That means that, despite making some progress with defensive work, the player is still nowhere near ready to do what matters most for his role: hit at a high level. And that is exactly what makes this update so concerning. Matt Shaw remains limited because of the serious sprain in his left wrist. The problem isn't simply that he has been away from the field. The biggest obstacle right now is his ability to complete a full swing. Shaw still cannot swing the bat at full speed, and that prevents the coaching staff from treating his return as something imminent. For a player who needs to regain his timing, confidence, and physical ability before facing MLB pitchers again, that detail is huge. And the calendar isn't waiting. The season is moving quickly, the playoff race is becoming tighter, and every game is starting to carry more weight. That is exactly why Counsel's update was so frustrating for Cubs fans. Chicago isn't thinking about some distant future. The team is trying to make a playoff push that could be decided within the next few weeks. And Shaw is still weeks away. That statement alone would be enough to worry any fan. But there is another detail that could make his road back even more difficult. Even once he is physically ready to start hitting again, Shaw is not simply going to show up at Wrigley Field and immediately return to the lineup. Because he has been sidelined for a significant amount of time, he will need to go through a minor league rehab assignment before he can be considered for a return to the Major League roster. In practical terms, there is still a sequence of steps that needs to be completed. First, Shaw has to fully regain his ability to hit. Then he needs to get his timing back and face pitchers in rehab games. Only after that can the Cubs determine whether he is truly ready to return to the MLB level. And every one of those steps takes time. That is the biggest problem. A fan might look at the situation and think, if he's already doing defensive work, maybe he's close to returning. But the reality presented by Counsel is different. Doing defensive work does not automatically mean a player is ready to face high-level pitchers. Hitting requires explosive movements, repetition, speed, and confidence. And when there is a wrist injury involved, there is simply no room to rush the process irresponsibly. The Cubs know that. But the fan base also knows the clock is ticking. And that combination is exactly what makes Matt Shaw's situation one of the most important stories to follow over the next few weeks. Because now there is one question nobody can ignore. Will Matt Shaw have enough time to return and help the Cubs in 2026? That is not an exaggerated question. If the player is still weeks away from returning and will then need to go through a minor league rehab assignment, the calendar could become Shaw's biggest opponent. The longer he remains sidelined, the smaller the window becomes for him to regain his timing before a potential playoff run. But there is still a reason not to completely give up hope. The fact that Shaw is already able to participate in defensive work shows that there has been progress. His recovery has not stalled. He is moving forward in certain areas, and that is important. The problem is that the biggest test is still ahead, getting back to swinging the bat at full speed. And until that happens, any prediction about a return date will remain extremely difficult. Craig Counsell, therefore, is not promising a quick return. The message has been one of caution. While that may frustrate fans, it also shows that the organization does not intend to put Shaw back on the field before he is truly ready. But for those who follow the Cubs game after game, that caution brings an enormous amount of anxiety. Because fans don't just want to know whether Matt Shaw will return someday. They want to know if he will return in time. That's the difference. The MLB season doesn't stop to wait for injured players. The series continue. Opponents keep winning. The standings keep changing. And when the decisive moment arrives, there may not be enough time left to wait for someone to regain their ideal rhythm. That's why every update on Shaw will be closely followed by the fan base. Every batting session, every movement of his wrist, every rehab game, every statement from Craig Counsell could completely change the perception of his chances of returning. And there is another strategic issue for the Chicago Cubs. If Shaw cannot return in time, the team will have to find other solutions. The roster will need to compensate for the absence of a player who could provide additional depth and options down the stretch. That puts even more pressure on the players who are healthy and available right now. The fan base knows that no team wins a season because of one player. But they also know that in such a tight race, every piece can make a difference. A strong stretch from Matt Shaw at the right moment could change a game. A big defensive play could save a run. A clutch hit could change an entire series. That is exactly why fans have been so eager to see the player return. Now, however, anticipation has turned into uncertainty. There is no confirmation that Shaw's season is over. But there is also no indication that his return is close. Cubs fans, now I want to hear from you. Could Matt Shaw's absence cost the team a playoff spot? Do you still believe he will be able to return in time to make a difference? Yes or no? I want to see what Cubs fans think about this situation. Leave your answer down below and stay tuned to the channel. Subscribe so you can follow everything that happens all the way through the end of the season.